Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. We're a day late for the Mexican Grand Prix review. How are you, Rob?
I'm good. My question is, how are you, Brian? Because you sent me a note yesterday of basically making it sound like you were essentially horizontal for all of Sunday with your bad back, and there was no way we were going to be able to record. So, how are you doing today?
Yeah, fantastic. Very, very excited to
Mm,
be here.
I'm not buying into that fantastic at all. And I think this is the first ever pod that I've done with you, and you were probably taken every pain relief known to man. And we'll just have to see how this pans out.
They don't call it a drug cocktail for nothing.
Oh man, I'm sorry, buddy. I hope you're feeling better soon and appreciate you making time to get the Mexican one done so that we can look forward to Brazil and hopefully you're doing cartwheels at how great the Grand Prix was and not lying down,
Well,
not
I
moving.
mean, I actually think the Mexican Grand Prix was the best it's been in the last handful of years. I loved it.
Yeah, 100%. So before we get there, let's not talk any more about bad backs and medication. Let's just jump into news and social, of which there wasn't a lot. And then we will pull apart the Mexican Grand Prix before we look forward to Brazil.
Awesome.
So not a lot, really, Brian, in the news this week. I picked a little snippet out that I saw a post from Mercedes, I think on LinkedIn, even of all places, which was the Austin Grand Prix was Mercedes' 300th Grand Prix since returning to F1 in Bahrain on the 14th of March 2010. And in that time since they've returned, they've accrued 8 constructors' titles, 7 drivers' titles, 119 wins, 131 pole positions, and 279 podiums. Not bad.
And it was also Fernando Alonso's 400th race, and he'd accumulated 2 world titles and 4 pissed off teammates.
Very, very true. And we had the other Austin fallout. McLaren lodged their appeal in the middle of the week, or whenever it was in the week. I lost track now. Against Lando's penalty, and almost every news outlet and social media commentator out there said this isn't even going to get past step one of the appeals
Yep.
process. If anyone doesn't know, then essentially when you go to see to put the appeal in with the stewards, first off, essentially, I think you just got to get them to admit they might be wrong. So, so you basically got to go, yeah, we don't agree with your decision. But before we're allowed to give you any evidence of why, you have to acknowledge that there's something you want to review, and we have to tell you we've got brand new evidence
Yeah,
that wasn't
something
available.
new
You took the
that you
time,
haven't seen
something new,
yet, or we
which
haven't
is
shown you
almost
yet.
yeah, which is almost impossible to find. Some people were saying, "Oh yeah, the 360-degree cameras on Lando's car clearly show that he overtook Max. So now Max becomes the overtaker, not the defender, which would completely throw that on its head." The only problem was we saw that on the TV angle, so not really new. But do you know what it turned out that all their new evidence was that they wanted to put forward?
I don't.
From what I can find, is almost a belief that they thought the stewards were wrong.
Like a misinterpretation of the rules.
I don't know. I just think they wanted to say, "I think you're wrong." That was it, and I think they just wanted to make a grandstand of it. But we'll get to why that maybe had some kind of oh no, not fallout, but it put it this way: Lando and penalties and things will play a part in our Mexican review.
Definitely. And also the reactions of their fellow drivers are getting stronger, but we'll get to that in a second. There were a lot of rumors around the paddock and around the internet this last week, and one of the favorite ones was Oscar to Red Bull. And one person even said Helmut Marko said this himself. And then Oscar's like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, mate." These kept going, kept going. However, on the Red Bull front, even before the race weekend really got moving, there was a lot of conversation about Liam Lawson and the impressive drives he's had, and the question becomes, is he ready for a Red Bull seat next year? I'm like, Checo's standing right over there. That's his seat today because they're not giving away Max's. And it's become like the most spoken, unspoken rumor is who's driving next to Max next year. Obviously, we'll
Uh,
tackle that after the race review a little more, but it's like bizarre to me that it's such an open topic.
and then it just makes me laugh. Good old Pit Lane Paul has told us that every time these stories surface about Team X has spoken to driver Y, he's like, "Of course they will. That's what happens every single week in, week out. You are not doing your job properly as a team or as a driver representative if you're not having conversations about possibilities at every single turn. Because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what silly season's going to throw up. You never knows when some hot rookie's going to come through and want to be taking a seat. So it'd be remiss of everybody on the grid if they weren't keeping their options open. But the truth isn't very clickbaity, so we have to pick one specific example of a driver talking to a team, or sorry, a team talking to a driver and go, "Oh, like Oscar." Wow.
Is it actually like one of those silly season random rumor generators where you just hit the button and it dee, 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 and it like spins everything around?
Oh,
Nigel Mansell to Haas.
Oh, speaking of Nigel Mansell, what a great little segue you served up there. Williams revealed their special livery for Mexico and Brazil. I think it's going to get a run out in Brazil as well. It's to kind of commemorate their partnership with Mercado Libre, and their flagship color is yellow. So we now on the engine cooling have on the engine cover bright yellow. So now Williams has got yellow and blue, and we're almost back to the Mansell color scheme. I love it.
It is pretty good. I gotta say, it is. I thought it was really good. It was nice that they didn't just copy some other team's colors. We see what you did last time, Alpine. I loved it. Did you enjoy it too?
Yeah, I thought it was. I think it's just that emotional heartstring kind of like tugging on and going, "Oh, remember the Williams that you grew up watching." So I think the fact they just once they put that splash of yellow in alongside the blue, I was all in.
Yeah.
Simple as that, really.
And as Rob kind of, as we alluded to when we started, I was on the road all week and then came home to a back that decided to not actually function. So let's open the video vault. The door, I'm swinging it open with my mind. I cannot actually use my arms and legs to do that. And you know what? Better time to close it, because I got nothing, baby.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. We've got to keep a decent pace up this week to make sure that the meds don't run out by the time we get to the Brazil preview and you're suddenly screaming in agony. So
I'm going to make it.
Okay, race weekend. Practice was weird this week. And it was weird because, look, I'm all for giving kind of the reserve drivers a shot at driving in the car, 100%. But it does kind of make you kind of watch FP1 even less knowing what's going on, because half of the drivers on the field are nobody that's going to be represented over the course of the rest of the weekend. No, qualifiers or racers are going to be involved in that group. And then in FP2, we had the weird tyre test thing going on when everybody was running those strange tyres, which I know you're a tyre fan, Brian, but not sure you got much enjoyment out of FP2.
I actually did watch. That was one of the practice I saw the most of. And no, I didn't, because they try, right? In years past, we've had these extended practices where they'll run the next generation tire out to get data. And in the past, it would be like just a black wall tire, and they don't tell you what tire is which. So you really had nothing. This time, they decided, you know what, we're going to let people compare. So if someone's on the current, like let's say C4s, we'll tell you that in the third run, McLaren's on the C4s. And you can compare that to the first run for Haas on the C4s, because only like a couple people are going to run the same tires. But you had to do geometry and arithmetic to figure out when they were running and at which, was it a quick run or a long run? It meant nothing. So you got nothing from it. It's like they spent all this time to create the world's most complicated system of figuring it out, and I still couldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, just to summarize, FP1 and FP2, we had Ollie and Albon had come in together. Ollie kind of moved off the racing line, but I think left himself in a position where he probably caught Alex unaware. As Alex came around the corner and saw him there, they showed on the replay that Alex's natural reaction was to lift off slightly. And the moment that he lifted off, he unloaded the car, lost his aerodynamics, and the back end said, yeah, I don't feel like gripping the road anymore, and just sent him spiraling into Ollie. So Alex was angry and kind of called him an idiot and swear words and all this kind of stuff. I'd like to think that when Alex sees the replay of it,
yeah.
I don't think Ollie did anything wrong. Maybe just a bit naive as to where he decided to pull over, maybe. Not sure.
I will say the Top Gear sound effect was perfect when I saw the highlight of this, and it was, Oliver! If you're telling me that isn't exactly what Alex said as he turned the corner and sees him sitting there right near the racing line, Oliver!
Yeah, and last but not least, from FP1, we had Max had an engine issue, and we'll come back to that more because that really would start to tell a tale as we got into the weekend. Schwartzman got hit with a 5-place grid penalty that he may never end up serving. I'm not sure if they keep this open ended. I can't
They
find it
do.
in the rules as to whether it's current season or forever. So
Well,
you
there's
think
one
it's
other
forever?
driver that I'm aware of who currently is sitting on a 5 place grid penalty, and it's Jensen Button. So Robert Schwartzman joins Jensen Button, and I tried to do a little extra research, but again, by the time I was looking into this, I was getting a little loopy. I'm fairly confident those are the only two, or at least let's say two of the more famous unserved penalties that's might remain out there forever. Because Schwartzman, who knows when or if he'll ever have a drive, because it's a grid penalty. So if he does
Yeah.
future practices, doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And Button got his. He came in and did a stand-in once, didn't he, in Monaco for somebody? I
Exactly.
haven't clicked your link to find out the details, but I
It
know it
was
was
Monaco.
then. He
Yep.
he came back, did a cameo, got a penalty, never going to serve it. So
I'll get you
yeah,
next time.
yeah. FP2 there was the Big George crash, which was quite a nasty one. He got out kind of holding his ribs for a minute. I was like, ooh, do we have a broken rib situation? Will we see him for FP3 in quali? But thankfully, he was fine.
Well, and so
Um,
that's a practice crash for George. And if you remember at COTA, he had the quali crash. And
yep.
so that's 2 weeks in a row where he's had pretty massive crashes. And obviously, we saw Lewis lose control early in the race at COTA and go off. And I'm watching practice. This was the one I saw. And when George crashed, I'm like, that Mercedes is just like a top. Like if a gnat farts across the other side of the track, the Mercedes loses all downforce and just is undrivable. I don't understand what's
Is
happening with
that
that
the
car.
F1 equivalent of chaos theory? A butterfly flaps its wings and
Correct.
there's an earthquake somewhere, and that farts and a Mercedes loses its rear end.
On the infield, and the Mercedes is done. I don't. I mean,
Oh,
like
but
you and I have joked, right? That seriously, for 1 second here, we've joked about Mercedes, and some weeks they look great, and some weeks they look great in practice, but not the race, and vice versa. They have become the most just. You can't tell what you're getting. Each week, it's a new thing with Mercedes, and it's
yeah,
always a new problem they're managing. They eat tires, or they have no downforce, or this, that, no balance. It's actually making the chaos of F1 even more exciting, I think.
yeah, and Max continued to have engine problems in FP2. FP3 served up nothing really. There was no surprises. Top 10 was the top 10 you would probably expect, and the only mild shock was that Sauber actually looked a little bit quicker than Alpine in FP3. But the engine problem, I didn't see it get covered at this point. I've read it this morning, so it's actually your back issues have given me the chance to read an extra story, which was that they've gone back. They Max had real poor power in practice, so they swapped him back to an old engine, which was apparently he doesn't get a penalty for it because he's going back to an existing engine, but it was an existing engine that had already been designated as will only ever use this engine for practices for the rest of the season. It was never supposed to race again, but they'd got such a problem with the engine that he had in the car during practice, they swapped it out anyway, so they don't suffer a penalty. There are rumours that he might be forced that this one held on for the Mexican Grand Prix, but there's a story going around at the moment that Max might take a grid penalty this week and do an
Hmm.
engine swap because Brazil was much easier to overtake at, you might as well do it with a nice fresh engine.
Was
So
it 2 years ago where Lewis put the fresh
rocket ship
engine in?
Lewis,
Yeah,
yeah.
and he just passed everybody. Didn't I think it was a sprint weekend, and he went through sprint quali from like last time wise, and then was first, and then anyway, it was just chaos.
So then Quali came around, and I think Quali gave us the little view of Mexico might have woken from its eternal siesta of not serving up much excitement for us and decided it was going to get feisty right from Q1, where we saw Joe, Ocon, and Colapinto go. Maybe not too much of a
Yeah, a
surprise,
little
but we got a
surprise
little
Colapinto, but
sprinkle
okay.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, but we got a little sprinkle of jalapeno spice as we saw Oscar just failed to string a lap together after looking like he was a rocket ship in practice. And then I hate to say this, but maybe this isn't a surprise, but it's still surprising. Checo. Oh my gosh. What do you make of Checo crashing out? Not
Well,
crashing literally, but
I mean, Checo. It's like it gets harder every week. I honestly, if there were any doubt before that he'd have a drive in 2025, there can be none. He has to be replaced. I'm sorry. This is unacceptable for any team, let alone a top tier team, to have this continual gap to your teammate.
yeah, agree. So that was those guys out. Q2 came around. It was actually starting to look a little bit positive that Bottas make it through to Q3. That car was it was probably only going to be in 10th spot by his bare fingernails if he could drag it there, but he wasn't a million miles away. Not like previous races where like 1.5 seconds adrift or whatever. Everything was all kind of setting us up for a kind of a final run. And then Yuki was the party pooper and decided to launch into a barrier, and he essentially hosed up Lawson, Alonso, Stroll, and Bottas all on their final run. We'll never know what they might have done because the red flag came out, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun to see the green Sauber doing something in Q2 for a change, and possibly getting to Q3. Valtteri has a long, great history at Mexico. But yeah, I mean, again, the crash kind of ended what may or may have not have been for some of those drivers. So we get to Q3, and it was kind of neat, right, watching Q3. I enjoyed all the different times that people would pop faster laps up, and there was a question: is the track still evolving? What's going to make a difference? Fresh tires, and then Carlos just put in the craziest lap. How much ahead was Carlos of just about everybody else when he first put it in? Like four tenths or something like that.
When Sainz popped his on and was so far clear, I thought he must have done the same thing as Verstappen when Verstappen got his lap deleted, where Verstappen had essentially been too aggressive trying to take a straight line through that chicane and had cut the corners and therefore exceeded track limits and got his time deleted. I thought Sainz must have done the same thing because there's no way you just suddenly find that amount of time in your pocket. Oh, look, what's this in my pocket? Oh, look, it's a third of a second. But no, he absolutely nailed it. And no one else got close. I mean, Verstappen, fair play. If it's a sort of second-hand engine that isn't supposed to be racing again, dropped a stellar lap in as well to secure second, which gave us a feisty front row with Norris and Leclerc tucked up right behind. No Nats farted, so Russell and Hamilton took up the next
third row
spot.
lockout.
Third row lockout, and then we had Matt the Gasman, Albon, and Hulk. Both races.
Love it. That was amazing. I did not see this one. If you want to talk about this before we start the race.
Oh, this is brilliant. So Paddock Passion on Threads popped up a video that I hadn't seen. I guess it was on TV because I think they've taken a screen grab of it. But it is Sainz walking past Lando, who's been interviewed. And as Sainz walks past Lando, he turns around, he notices that he's left his groin area unguarded. And if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, you would know that Pit Lane Paul has told us the gag that is as old as time in the pit lane. If you're gonads are undefended, they are a target. Sainz walks past Lando, little cheeky look over his shoulder, sends his right hand backwards, straight into Lando's groin. Lando drops to the floor. It is a proper strike. It was amazing. I was just laughing so much. I had to share it on Threads because I know Paul has told us a story, and I've got no reason not to believe that Schumacher didn't punch him in the nads. But seeing it and knowing that the drivers are that childish that they play it as well, it just made my day. Yeah. Then we got lights out. We could almost do an entire podcast to, I think, the first three corners. But
I mean, yes. And then we got a long lull of the safety car after the chaos of the first three corners went through the field. But Max with another good start, forcing the leader 2 weeks in a row into defensive moves. And this time it was Carlos. Last week it was Lando. And so you kind of look at these kind of discussions that says, all right, Max pretty good off the start, and he takes advantage. And I got to remember my notes here, Rob, because I wanted to highlight this. He really likes to take advantage of that first lap dispensation that the stewards give you and pull the move he uses the rest of the race, but on the first couple corners, because you get sort of, first lap, turn 1 or 2 or 3, we'll let that slide as they kind of settle into the field. And he runs Carlos wide. Off the track. He gives a spot back. Max is in first. But then, as we're watching that happen, which was enough chaos and just really enjoyed it as I'm sitting there watching that, we see cars flying in the back. And it's one of those shots where, with no real knowledge, you see a car doing something it shouldn't. And Yuki's going backwards in the air faster than the cars are turning. I'm like, well, that's not good.
Yeah, and at this point I was thinking, of course Yuki crashed out because I put him into my fantasy team this week. So, of course, the Veil curse kicks in. Sorry, Yuki. However, we see the safety car being deployed. The next thing we see is a stricken Albon sitting at the side of the road with his front left wheel hanging off. And I'm like, oh, well, do you know what? I dropped Albon for Yuki, so I was getting screwed in turn one either way because...
Although you got it in qualy. So then I guess... just taking that apart, right? It looked like Pierre came over from the middle of the track and was right next to Alex. Alex had nowhere to go. He literally got hit from the right and then the left. The left was Yuki. No penalties given. I mean, I think we all look at it as a racing incident. I don't hold Pierre at all responsible for that. Very little to none for Alex. He had nowhere to go. He was a sandwich. He couldn't back out. There were cars behind him. Couldn't go forward. He had nowhere to go. And, we've given Yuki some tough times at times when he's been a little aggressive or made mistakes. I don't think he made a mistake. I think he went for something and he just should have backed out a little more, backed off to the side a little bit. But I view it as a racing incident all around, and maybe like a 2% on Yuki, and then the other 98 on Checo. I know he wasn't around there. I'm just blaming Checo for everything.
I think you've got to firmly put it in the racing incident category, because the good old Senna quote of if you stop going for a gap that's not there, you're not a racer anymore. I mean, Yuki saw a gap, went for it, then realized that gap was suddenly closing as all the cars concertinaed up, and suddenly 3 into 2 doesn't go around the corner. And at that point, I don't think oh my gosh, I can't really back out of it. I can't really go left because I've got a wall next to me. I can't really go any faster because I won't make the corner. So he just kind of just left it where he was and went, just hope for the best. And you notice there was a couple of little taps first before the final one that actually did all the damage. It was like bump, bump, as if a couple of love taps just to let you know I'm here. You might want to move over a bit because otherwise we're going to have bang, crash, I'm out. Yeah. And then we got, during the never-ending safety car, we got first, I wrote in the notes, amazing start from Checo. He's up 5 spots. And I hadn't finished typing that sentence when up came the noted for false start. And it said he's being investigated. And I'm like, well, if he did a false start, they got sensors in the ground. So it's just yes or no, isn't it? Why do you have to investigate it? He either jumped the start or he didn't. Turns out it wasn't even that. He was too far forward in his box. Did you like his radio message when they told him?
He's like, my start was perfect.
Yeah, and they were like, you might have been too far forward. And he's like, well, review it because I wasn't. I'm like, pretty sure the fact you've got a penalty is because they've already reviewed it, Checo, and you were already way too far forward in your box.
They weren't guessing.
Exactly. It's so anyway, we trundled round for 6 laps watching many replays of the start chaos and the Max on Sainz and Yuki going backwards. But all of a sudden, safety car in this lap, which we always like. And I've got to say, Sainz, if we did an award for best restart after a safety car and not letting the leader get away from you, Sainz just won that one. That's it. Just end the award, because Max does his normal thing of just trying to like back it up. You don't know when I'm going. You don't know when I'm going. Oh, I'm gone. And Max is so good at doing that and building up a gap and getting out of DRS. But Sainz nailed it.
He did.
Absolutely nailed it.
I was going to say, who's usually the best at that is Max. It's the person I'd least like to have behind me if I were restarting after a safety car. He always seems to know when you're going. And you nailed it. He also, when he does this, he always finds the time catching someone asleep. I feel like he's caught Russell one time so badly. Russell almost got passed before the start-finish line, which is not allowed. It was a great restart. Carlos did a good job sticking with him, and then over the course of the next lap, got him into turn 1. I like the move he did, too. It was late. I know it's DRS driven, but it was still a late break on the inside where he had to make those 2 tough chicanes, 2 tough corners there. So I thought kudos to Carlos, because that then set up, again, what is becoming the spiciest battle on track, Max Lando.
Just put a pin in that before we get to that. So I'm going to just make I have to make an announcement here.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to let Mexico off my normal Rob's rant about DRS. Was every single overtake in this race pretty much DRS driven? Yeah, it was. But given how boring this race has been in the last couple of years, I'm willing to give special dispensation that I was okay with it. The only bit that kind of didn't sit right with me is the way that this track is laid out with the 2 detection zones, but the the 2 DRS zones, but the 1 detection point.
You get it if you've passed.
Yeah, Sainz does a brilliant move on Max. And then as they go around the corner, he gets it again to get away from Max, which just feels like anti-DRS.
Why is it so hard to put a second detection point somewhere? I don't understand
I don't know either. But like you say, that now meant the spice. Mexico was digging deep into its bag of spices, and it went for a ghost pepper. And we got Lando and Max picking up after last week. Norris is in Max's DRS. He's obviously going to try and put a move in. They come together. I mean, it looked like it was going to full on contact. I actually thought we were going to see the two of them spin out, but they didn't. But Max runs the pair of them off the track. They go so far wide that was it last week when we were talking about Charles's eyes popping wide open at the first corner and he just went through and
Yeah.
I'll have some of this, thanks. Groundhog Day.
I actually have a sound I'm going to try to pull off. Yes, I've taken too many muscle relaxants to get this right, but we're giving it a shot. Here's what the new sound should sound like.
Through goes Charles Chuck Leclerc.
Through goes Charles Chuck Leclerc, because you nailed it. I was thinking the same thing. 2 weeks in a row, Charles has just looked like, as you say, licking his lips going, thank you, fellas. I love this. Last week, it was an opportunity for the win, and it was on turn one, so it was a little early. But he popped through there on the left at COTA and went down the hill, or up the hill and then down the hill and said, thank you very much. And then this time, yes, he only went from fourth to second, but I think it saved his race, not having to try to get through Max and Lando, who are both, one's in a faster car and one's a defensive expert. So it was awesome. Like you say, these two guys are battling. Max is doing what Max really likes to do and just run people off the road. And then Charles looks and says, oh, I'll fancy second place. Thank you very much. So can I ask you this? Like, 2 10-second penalties. The first part, turn 4, was aggressive. And, you could argue who was ahead at the apex and this, that, and the other. But then the one at 8, I mean, everybody's off the road. Max is way off. He doesn't even get remotely close to making the corner and pushes Lando wide. To you, was there a degree of difference? Was one worse than the other? We're not trying to create the new rules on passing, but I love your thoughts because I think there were differences.
Oh, I think there are differences. I'm just not sure that there's a sliding scale for the FIA or the stewards to it. They can't sort of say, look, you've gone beyond the rules. You force a driver off the track. However, now I've got a sliding scale of severity. So it's either going to be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 seconds. It's 10 seconds, right, once they do that. And I think what Max fell victim for this week, we kind of commended Max to some degree last week of it's not his fault that he knows how to game the rules perfectly. He knows how to do the turn one as aggressive as he wants because he knows he's not going to get into trouble for it because those are the rules. And he knows that if he's the defending driver on the inside of a corner, he knows how to play that to his advantage. And last week, as much as everybody got upset about it, do you know what? He probably was right on the absolute. If there were track limits for rules, he was right on track limits of the rules last week. This week, I think knowing he was in a slower car and he had that other engine swapped out, and he knew that if he let Lando go, he was never catching him back. He went too far. He went beyond the edge of the track limits, and he got 2 penalties. I mean, for every Red Bull fan that was telling all the McLaren fans to stop crying last week and just suck it up, those are the rules, I think you have to take your own medicine. And this week, it's a case of all the Red Bull fans will just have to go, yeah, Max went a little bit too far this week and rightly got caught out by the rules. It's, that's my view.
I mean, I agree. I didn't actually mean to infer should there have been differences in the penalty given, but rather did the actions causing the penalties, were they different? And to me, the first one was just Max thought he was ahead more and applied the same rules to Austin that he got away with and said, you know what, I'm going to force you out while I stay on the track. And it's an aggressive dive bomb move. But then the second one felt way worse. Just dive bombing, very little braking, and going straight off the track to cut the other person off who was already on that line. That's the one that felt different to me. And I know Max likes to drive that way, and I have no problem with Max driving that way because usually it's the other driver yields. There's a relatively minor tire touch. I'm not talking about cops, but I'm talking about some of the other times Max pulls the move and kind of tries to run someone off. The second thing he did felt materially different to me. It felt like his anger was driving at that point, and less Max. But again, what do I know?
No, I'd agree with you. I think they were different. I think they're both worthy of the 10-second penalty. You might say the first one is just on the edge of needing the 10-second penalty. The second one is, well, if there was such a thing as a 20-second penalty, the second one's almost on the 20-second penalty doorstep. So both warranted, but I agree with you, both different. What we also had going on right now is that after Piastri's disaster, his tyres started coming into their zone, and he started making moves. George was making moves. He took Lewis, and we had both Haas then in 7 and 8, and everything was kind of looking, it's getting spicy. Everything was close. The only thing that wasn't close was poor old Alonso to finishing his 400th race weekend because he retired on on lap 16. But poor old Alonso.
It was a bummer. I did like his helmet.
Yeah.
And then we had another fun battle, and we had a lot of these throughout the race that kind of once again kept it interesting. Like COTA, as we said on the review, there was always something going on, even if it wasn't always for first, but it was spread out evenly, and you got to see all these great battles. And it kind of started feeling that way for Mexico, because then we ended up seeing Checo and Liam battling each other out. They almost took each other out. Checo gets some damage to his side pod and his floor. And I don't know, like, to me, it seemed like a racing incident. I know Checo got the 5-second penalty to start the race. I was expecting him to potentially get another penalty here. It didn't feel like it was Liam to me, but it was fun to watch the person in the Red Bull Junior team fighting against the Red Bull Senior team for like 17th position or whatever, 12th position, which is embarrassing for one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And then after Checo tried to recover, he kind of had some wheel spin, which let Stroll get right up behind him and had DRS on Stroll, which Checo managed to hold him off for a bit. But it's like, where Checo wants to be is losing out to Lawson for 15th and then having to fend off. And I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but it's going to sound it. Having to fend off Lance Stroll of all people. Checo does not want to be trying to fight off Lance Stroll. He needs to be lapping Lance Stroll, not trying to fend him off. And then I don't know if you caught this. The TV commentators made no mention of it whatsoever. So maybe it was just me looking up at the TV at the wrong moment or something after writing notes. But Lewis was coming down to take Colapinto, and it looked like Colapinto in the braking zone did a wild move to his right-hand side to cut the door off. It looked like I thought they were going to come together, but then nobody mentioned it. So maybe it was just me daydreaming.
No, I saw too. It seemed late and it seemed very sharp. But I mean, what do you? I don't know. It's the young guys were looking aggressive. Let me put it that way. I was enjoying watching the young guys go around the track.
No, me too. So then we had Piastri knocking on the door of the top 10 to come and try and get some points for McLaren. And we had Norris hanging out in DRS or getting close to DRS for Max. And I'm thinking at this point, you know he's got 20 seconds, but you also know you've got two Ferraris that are making hay while the sun shines in front of Max, disappearing off into the distance. Does he risk a move? Because if he risks a move and gets taken out, then that's probably goodnight Vienna in the World Drivers' Championship. He needs to be getting points over Max, not scoring nothing. But while I was kind of thinking this through in my head, Max pitted to go and serve his penalty, so kind of all of that was redundant. Yeah, timing was perfect. There's me trying to come through with these clever thoughts to write in the notes about, if I was Lando, what would I do? Would I maybe go for it, or would I hang back? And oh no, he's pitting. That's
the Zach Galifianakis confused meme was going on. So Max boxes, serves 20 seconds, comes out in 15th. We started to have some big gaps in between people. And then we started seeing additional people pitting. And it was kind of fascinating, the sequencing of the pit stops, because there wasn't really a strong undercut. So there wasn't like a big push. If the guy in front of you boxed, you didn't have to box immediately to fend it off. And we had some gaps. So we didn't get a ton of pit stop drama. That was the one thing that could have spiced this up a little more, maybe with some strategic decisions that mattered. They really didn't, because the extended safety car to start, it made it a one-stopper for everybody. So took some of that risk away, I guess. But you know what? For the rest of the battling, I'll take it.
Yeah. One thing we didn't touch on just before Max boxed was that Perez basically got away with what Max got penalised for. And this is one thing that I am going to have a little bit of a beef with about the stewards, is that I've got no problem with them. If you look at letter of the law, last week, the penalties they gave out were probably correct by the law. This week, what they did for Max, probably correct by the letter of the law. It's the inconsistency that drives fans mad, I think, because Perez could have easily got exactly the same. I didn't note it down. I think somebody else did something very similar as well. So it's like, well, hang on. You can't just penalise Max for driving another driver off the track and then just turn a blind eye to that one over there. Or if you do, I think we as fans need some communication that comes out to say why. Why was incident A different to incident B? Because I get why you can't compare back across races, right? You can't go, well, this is the same as it was in COTA last week. Different racetrack, different situation. When it's the same event within a few laps of each other, it's like, oh, come on, guys, just be consistent. That's all I want. Where were we? Yeah, the pit stops. Then George.
Yes.
George gets two in a row. He's been all of a sudden. George is. It's like even within the same race, and Nat farts, and now the Mercedes is fast. Um,
He got Oscar and then Liam, if I remember right.
yeah. Two in a row.
You know,
And kind of
one more
go
thing,
on.
just as these randomly make it through the fog of drugs from the drugstore, um, having people mess up quali on their own accord. So Oscar, Checo, a couple more Checo, Lando, having people mess up quali on their own accord when it's not a car situation means the race, they should have that race pace to get back through. And I think even though the lot were DRS, you still fought it off through turns 2 and 3 with the guy right behind you. And I think the last two races we've had people mess up their quali. Lewis, and we see people, coming from the back of the grid. George pit lane start. And so I think it actually spices up some of these races, especially like a Mexico, which doesn't normally give a lot on offer. It was kind of like, to your point, yes, they were DRS. We're not going to complain. We'll take them. You still had to make it stick. And it was a late move no matter what you did.
Yeah. Agree. I mean, but you also got the tale of two screwed up qualifiers, right? You had Piastri that screwed it up and actually went on a mission to make his way through the field, and then you had Checo who got taken by Stroll around lap 42 for 15th, and then Lawson cruised up to the back of Checo, and I thought, well, this is going to get spicy again, and Lawson dispatched him so easily. As he went past, it was almost like, and I'll be having your seat as well as I go past. But was this the moment when he gave a little wave to Checo? Do we know when in the race the little wave took place?
I thought it was after the race, if I'm being honest, when I read the highlight, but it could be.
I mean, the onboard that I saw looked like it was the overtake. Like
It
it was
might
high
be.
speed.
I think you might
Flipped
be
him the
right.
bird as he went past. If anyone doesn't know, there's a little video doing the rounds of Lawson giving him the one finger salute as he goes past him. But
And then
there might
Rob's favorite part of the race.
yes,
Was it lap 43 when this happened? I was laughing. It made me laugh and then cry because it hurt to laugh.
Yep.
George
Go on, you
says,
do it.
George goes, is it sweating? Is it raining out there? Or is it just me? Do I have that sound effect?
I don't know.
I don't
Do
think
you?
so.
Oh.
That's why I was
And
confused.
everyone, I went on Threads and Twitter almost instantly after that, and just the outpouring of people saying, "Is it rain or is George sweaty again?" It was like, oh, the
It was
classic. I can't
brilliant.
even remember what race was that from where George thought that it was raining, but it was sweat on the inside of his visor.
I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Last
I
year,
mean,
some were good.
it's why my fantasy team is called George's Sweaty Visor.
So when he
but
said
that's
that, I'm
all I
like,
know.
you can't be doing this again. And you know how many other people saw raindrops? None.
Exactly. Then I kind of thought, do you know what? We kind of had our first lull from about 47,
Yep.
5 laps, really nothing of any note happened. And then I'm not even the one on meds, but I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole in the notes here where Lewis, on lap 52, cruised
just seeing
right
this.
up. You're going to just see this. So I'll just read this through because this is just maybe a window into my childish brain. Lap 52, Lewis cruises right up behind George, and I said, Lewis is right up George's trumpet. I was expecting an overtake to happen the next lap in the start-finish straight. Lap 53, I put, well, Lewis is still stuck in Trumpet Town. He just hasn't been able to get past. Lap 54, Lewis is thinking of opening an Airbnb in Trumpet Town. Lap 55, Lewis named mayor of Trumpet Town. Lap 56, Lewis opens the first Starbucks in Trumpet Town. Lap 59, Hamilton is given the keys to Trumpet Town. Lap 64, giant statue of Lewis is constructed in Trumpet Town. And lap 66, 14 laps after it started, residents devastated as Lewis finally leaves Trumpet Town. That was my set of notes on the Lewis-George battle. How did George hold him off so long with a broken front wing?
Well, first of all, an insight into your brain reminds me of this. Second of all, excellent use of trumpet. Third of all, I actually think that maybe Lewis needed a little break. Like, he was, a little tired, and he's like, I'm going to take a rest. I think he hitched his Mercedes to George's Mercedes and just let him drag him around for 14 laps that close, and we just couldn't see. It was...
Just put his feet up, yeah.
Yeah, like in
yeah,
Top
you could be
Gear, when
right,
they
yeah.
brought the Alfa Romeos in and they had the line holding them all together. That's what it was. They just wanted Lewis to conserve some fuel, conserve some mileage. He put it in neutral. and he just hung out on the back of George's car for 14 laps. Like, yeah, I'll pass you now. It was
And
unbelievable. Like you said, after 52, I'm like, oh, he's going to get this done right now. And then no updates. And eventually TV stopped showing it. They're like, well, it's never going to happen.
And then sprinkled in all of the trumpet news was a very minor incident where Norris got into Charles's DRS and was absolutely pushing him. And I thought, you know what, Leclerc's got this. Leclerc has got just enough battery conservation and power to pull away from. Oh no, Charles has lost it on the last corner. I mean, talk about spidey sense to be able to recover that and not put that Ferrari into a wall. Yes, he lost the spot to Lando, but Jeepers, did you see the onboards?
I did. It was epic. He's a talented driver. I mean, that was crazy. Like, you put a regular human being in there, there's no chance they recover that. No chance. Like, the speed with which he recovered it and then kept it going straight down the dusty road. I don't know how you do that. I mean, all of that requires a degree of difficulty, which was insane. But it also meant sayonara second place. And that's fine. And then we kind of get towards the end. One other thing I'd want to highlight is Colapinto and Lawson, who had been pissing off everyone else, finally found each other towards the end. And they're like, oh, see who is king of the annoying rookies. And I know Lawson, ran last year. Okay, but whatever. So point being, Colapinto, I think, got a penalty for that move, if I remember right.
I think he should. He just rejoined and just took Lawson's front wing off.
Exactly. And Colapinto's interviewed afterwards on F1 TV, and that I saw late last night in between the Medhays. And he basically said, it was on Lawson for turning in at that point. And I'm thinking there ain't no more track for him to go on at that point. So, I don't know. It was fun. And then the last
final
part,
lap.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go on. I was going to say the final. I want your view, Brian. Final lap, we got two radio messages come on almost within like about 2 seconds of each other. Red Bull to Perez, pit for softs for fastest lap. Ferrari to Charles, pit for softs for fastest lap. Who was your money on securing fastest lap in this big Red Bull Ferrari showdown?
As I took there was a little extra on Checo's message, and they said box for softs for fastest lap potential or possibility. They put a word on the end that gave it like attempt. I think they said attempt. For Charles, they just said box for softs for fastest lap. You're going to get it. And I mean, it wasn't going to be close. And I'll bring this forward from the stats. I did a little research. So Checo boxed. He was one lap down, so it was his last lap, but it was 70. Charles was on 71. Charles's time, Rob, are you ready for this? 1 minute, 18.3 seconds. 1:18.3. Okay? So you'd think Checo would be close, right?
A couple of tenths, maybe a bit of damage, 3 tenths, something like that, 4 tenths.
9 tenths. 9 tenths back. Almost a whole second on a fastest lap attempt with no fuel. 1:19.2.
And no traffic. Both of them had a completely unhindered run.
And again, I know his car had a hole in the side pod. I saw that. I get that. He had floor damage. I saw that. I get that. It's just, I gotta be honest. There's so many weekends in a row where we say, how the hell does he keep a seat in 25? I gotta ask, how the hell does he keep a seat in 25?
Yeah, I know. So, despite that he didn't get too much TV coverage because he just did such a good job, Carlos took the checkered flag. Lando in second, Charles in third. That was our podium. It was great to see Carl Lando reunited. In fact, they went out for dinner that night as well. I've seen some pictures on threads this morning of Lando going out with the Sainz family. It's just a good story.
It's a great story.
Rest of the top 10, we had Hamilton and George. Max did damage limitation and came home. And then points you like to see. K-Mag, Oscar did a great recovery drive. Hulk and Gasman. K-Mag, Hulk and Gasman. Haas have done phenomenal. Alpine, we've said, are terrible and have got no pace. I liked seeing those three guys in the points. I don't know what you thought, Brian.
100% agree. It's actually, I'd like to thank all the teams who screwed up this weekend and ended up having to retire cars, and to Aston Martin, who hasn't been good since the early part of last year. It's like there's really 7 cars fighting for points. Like, they're pretty much glued in the top 7. After that, it's become a wild card. And I love that. I'm here for that because the midfield has a chance at points pretty regularly.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just it's not just a foregone conclusion before we even start racing, which is just what's made this year. Well, not even this year. Probably after about the first 5 or 6 races, just made the rest of this year amazing. And like we've said multiple times, is just cannot wait for next year. But before we get on to next year, we've got to wrap this one up then. So you opened it up, I think, almost by saying best Mexican Grand Prix, the best Mexican Grand Prix in the history of the dirty side. That's for sure. Uh, this is the third time we've covered it, and it's the first time we've enjoyed it. So,
It's
well
true.
done, Mexico. What do you want to do? King of the Pits and the Pits, and then we'll
Let's
listen to Paul?
let's do it. I'm gonna have you go first on both, so that my brain has a little extra time to warm up. But we'll start with the king of the pits this week.
You're the king of the pit.
Okay, so I actually was half thinking about giving it to Oscar for his recovery drive, but the fact that he screwed up qualifying actually means that it's his own fault he was there. So
True.
kind of
True.
dismissed that one off. Um, so then it really became a fight between Carlo and Lando, really for different reasons. Carlo just nailed it and did phenomenally on the restart, and we never saw him again. He went into witness protection because he drove a brilliant race.
He did.
Lando had to deal, I think, with the pressure of the whole Max situation and the way he chased Charles down and forced Charles into an error to get second. That was pretty good, but it's got to go to the smooth operator. It's got to go
Nice.
to Carlo for me. What about you?
That's fantastic. I am debating two people. I'll pick one. One is Carlos Sainz.
Smooth operator.
To your point, it took me a second. I would have played it for you if I'd been able to get my hand to move that fast. So he was great. He was great in Austin. We talked about that. I actually included him in the conversation for King of the Pits last week for his second place finish and third place quali. But I'm debating between that and Io Komatsu, the Haas team principal, because
Ooh.
I don't know how much credit he really deserves. Maybe none. Maybe Gunter left when they were working on some changes to the car already, and Io just took over, and it's been a momentum kind of thing since. But it's hard not to give him credit. And when you have those two Haas in the points for the second time in a little bit here, points they need, points that are pushing them up the constructor battle, good for them. So I'm going to say Carlos as well, but I'm giving Io second place in my humble opinion. But with that,
Nice.
let's see what you got for the pits.
You're the pits.
I think we have the same one this week again.
I mean, I hate. There's a Monty Python sketch with a dead parrot, and it feels wrong to just keep going on about the fact that it's dead. But my the pits has to be Checo. Red Bull are now third in the constructors. Ferrari have leapfrogged them over the course of the last 2 weeks with their points finishes because they're getting both Ferraris right up at the business end of the results. McLaren are doing the same thing. They're still top on 566. Piastri's done an awesome job to, after messing up qualifying, has driven his way back into the points to get points to go with Lando's. Everything's great. Red Bull are Max, and whatever points Max can bring home. I know he got damaged, but he got damaged because he was trying to fight through from the back where he shouldn't have been in that car. Last year he had a great qualifying and was he third when he went on his big gung ho start and took himself out of the first corner?
He was
So
first,
he
second,
knows
or
this.
third as he turned
Yeah, he
in
knows
on-
this track. He knows this track. The car is not as great as it was, but it's point scoring. It's definitely he should be in that kind of maybe not podium conversation, but he should be in the fourth, fifth, sixth conversation to get decent points to go alongside Max. So sorry, Checo, but you are costing Red Bull a shot at not even second step on the podium here for the constructors, but like they're going to be third at this rate, and it's on Checo.
Totally agree, and I can't say it any better, so I won't. It's I will say this though, I voted him more than you, I think, and the number of votes is becoming embarrassing. And as I said before, I think the conversation in silly season is twofold at this point. It's who's in the Sauber seat, and hopefully it's Valtteri, but we've heard all the reasons and rumors and stories. And I think you got to ask who's in the second RB seat, because I don't know, it's either Yuki or Liam who's going to be next to Max next year. So who sits next to Liam or sits next to Yuki on the Visa Cash App RB Minardi Toro Rosso AlphaTauri?
Do you know what? And if that happens, if let's say Lawson goes and takes the seat next to Max, you could there's a case for Colapinto is next to Yuki, which solves Colapinto's way into a race seat for next year. Anyway, before we go and listen to Pit Lane Paul, because we mentioned the constructors, let's just give the drivers total. So Max is out front on 362. Lando is now sitting there on 315, which, for all you mathematicians, means we are now less than 2 race wins ahead. We are under the 50-point barrier, which, again, it's still a long way to go, but it's psychological now that as you start getting to within just, one DNF and a couple of carrying on what he's been doing by beating him by 8 points here and there, it's doable. So who knows? And then Charles leading the charge to kind of cement second spot on 291, Piastri on 251, and Carlo on 240. The rest are too far back. So, yeah, I still think Max is going to win this, but the rest of it is kind of all those cars are driving well at the moment. I've got no clue the way this is going to finish come end of the season.
I don't either, which is a pretty great situation to be in. Let's hear from Paul.
Hey now, so race is finished, podium's just finished. Actually, where are we? So, well, that was Mexico Grand Prix. Let's take it back. Qualifying. Oh, Sergio, I think I'll leave it there. Really disappointing from our side, actually, because we had the pace really to, I mean, we could have snuck in the top 10 on Valtteri's last lap before Yuki shoved it in the wall. So bittersweet, nice to get through the quali too, but look, that's what this sport is. It's frustrating. Roll on to the race. There's not really a lot to talk about in the race, was there? A bit slow starting and no, come on, joking aside. Look, first corner with Yuki and Albon, I think that's a racing incident. I like to think there's no punishment for that. I think it's just one of those things. And then it all sort of exploded a little bit, didn't it, with the top bunch. Look, I sympathise with Max a little bit on these penalties. Now, let me explain before you guys shoot me down. The issue I have is that this should have been, his style of driving hasn't changed. This should have been stamped out in 2021 when it had the chance, when he was doing this with Lewis all the time, where he runs the driver wide. You can't do it. You're not allowed to do it, in my opinion. I think if we go back that far, I think I've said this a few times, the FIA almost have made a rod for their own back. Now, they had a Grand Prix Drivers Association meeting as well as a normal driver meeting this week. And I know a lot was discussed on overtaking. I mean, when I say I got sympathy for Max, I don't. They're penalties. You can't keep doing it. He's ran 2 cars wide. Then you get Liam Lawson in Perez. I mean, I know Perez is moody. Let's go back to his start when he said he thinks he's on the line. You should check it. Well, they probably have checked it, Sergio, and you're not on the line. Like, dude, it's black and white. So, I don't know. It seemed to be maybe some tired drivers. I don't know. Liam Lawson in Perez. Let's look at those two. I think Perez is under so much pressure. I think it's getting to him. Could they have done better, them two? I mean, look, arguably, but that's racing, it's tight. Of course Liam's going to want to make an impression. I think there is a seat up for Red Bull next year. I know Yuki's going to do the Abu Dhabi test, but I think you're going to have that. It's part of what they're doing. And Sergio, I think he's just had a nightmare all weekend and the pressure's got to him. There's a lot of people saying about whether whether this will be his last race. I think I've said this, I'm not sure if I said this to you guys before, but I would be amazed based on the Ricciardo decision. Like, that just makes no reason to change that. I think Colapinto coming in is going to be a thing. I really think Colapinto will sign for Red Bull. Not necessarily Red Bull Racing. I think Perez, this will be his last season. I think it's starting to show. Which is a bit sad because, it's a bit like Danny Rick. I don't want to see someone go out like that. It's not the done thing. And then moving on throughout the race, it sort of slowed down a little bit then, didn't it? Lewis and George had a bit of a battle, which is quite good, but good Mexico Grand Prix, very enjoyable, good to watch. I don't think we're going to hear. I've not heard what Max has said in the media pen. That whole one's going to interest me a little bit. Sergio and Liam, that's something to look forward to for Brazil. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave this one. That the FIA made a rod for their own backs again. They should have stamped this out with Max years ago. They didn't. Max believes he can drive like that. Quite rightfully believes he can drive like that, if I'm being honest. And yeah, there we are. It was a good race. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to getting to Brazil. We leave tonight. So, yep, one more to go. And I get to go home for a while. So yeah, Viva la Mexico, vamos, and all of that sort of gubbins.
I need to say something, Brian.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you, Paul. I just want to say thanks. That was a great review.
Oh yeah. Cheers, Paul. And so I hadn't heard that. I don't know if you'd listened to it or not. I don't think you had. So okay, which means that a bit like how cars' performance converges towards the end of a set of regulations. Have you noticed how the last few weeks, me, you, and Paul are kind of almost on the same page with all of our observations and what we're saying? It's like opinion convergence is happening towards the end of the season here.
In terms of quality of races and what happened.
And like he mentioned... Yeah, people to blame. Colapinto, he thought Valtteri maybe had some pace to get into Q3. I mean, look at it. It's just like we're a singular mind at the dirty side now. It's amazing.
Yeah, all the time hanging out in the office. So let's do some stats to close out the week. And I did see this come through on Discord while I was down. Someone asked, I think it was Ben.
It was Ben, yeah.
Is this the music you have in it? Ben, let me know if this is what you're referring to. SAP Stats, Mexican GP edition. I hope that was the music, Ben. If not, put it on Twitter. Or, on Discord. I can't talk. Okay. So I had to get some stats, and the fact that the race was yesterday gave me a chance to do that. And I've already hit my favorite one that I went out and researched myself on the Charles and Checo fastest lap. But Carlos Sainz has now finished first and second in the last two races. He did not finish higher than third for 14 in a row. So back on form after being on form to start. He has 3 previous career wins. We heard this one on the TV a ton. This is the first time he's won twice in a single season because of Australia this year. Ferrari had only won twice in Mexico before today, which I found hard to believe when Crofty was saying that. Jackie Ickx, 1970, and Alain Prost in 1990. And it was the third race to be won from pole in the last 12 Grands Prix, and we've talked about this one too. It was Lando, the Netherlands, and Singapore. This was one of my favorite stats. I got this from Sean Kelly. Sainz is the first Spanish speaker to win in Mexico City, the largest Spanish-speaking city in the world. That's cool. And when he spoke to the crowd in Spanish, it gave me goosebumps. They were so excited, and I thought that was just great.
Did you see what James Coca posted where he took the screen grab?
I didn't.
When he was speaking in Spanish, I didn't even notice this on ESPN, but apparently the caption came up on the top, speaking in global language.
That's not what it said, is it really?
I don't know if it was photoshopped. If it did, then I fell for it. But
that's pretty good. Aren't all languages global? Norris's P2 was McLaren's first podium at this track since Senna finished third in 91. Again, Ferrari, McLaren, good to see them performing in Mexico, not something they've either done often. It was McLaren's 19th podium finish of the year, their most in a year since 2007. We already talked about the fastest lap point for Chuck. And that, as Rob already said, moved them into second in the Constructors, 29 points behind McLaren, but they're ahead of Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull has a lot of soul-searching to do on how they could ever keep Checo in that seat. I feel bad. Pay the man, let him go do something else. With P4 for Mercedes, Lewis finished off the podium in Mexico for the first time since 2018. I also forgot Lewis had such good drives in Mexico. We saw Max as the first non-win for him in the last 4 years. Finished sixth, as Rob said, kind of a opportunity for damage limitation. But Verstappen, this is a powerful one, has not finished within 19 seconds of a race winner since the summer break, and he was 59.5 seconds behind the winner in Mexico. Now, we know there was a 20-second penalty, so let's take that aside. But he hasn't been within 19 since summer break. Insane. We already talked about the fact he's 47 points up. It's the smallest the gap has been in the drivers since Monaco. And then a couple last ones here. P7 for Haas. Magnussen took his best result since fifth in Bahrain, the opening race of 22. And it's his only other top 7 finish in the 2020s It was Haas's
Wow.
best ever finish at this track, and Haas scored with both cars for the third time this season.
Oh, go Haas.
I know, amazing. And then the last one I have is on Valtteri. He was P14, but he did run in the points today. He'd only completed 20 laps in the points in 2024 so far, and he went to lap 50 before pitting out of 71. A very long, extended first stint.
I thought we might be seeing, was it Albon that went to the last lap and then pitted?
We've had a couple of those. Albon last year.
Yeah.
Somebody else this year. And then fantasy, we cannot really do any fantasy right now because, as Lando would say,
It's broken! It's broken!
and so they were like pending points, and then they were like, we'll figure it out. And then Albon had 18 overtakes associated when he went out on lap 1, and then they're like, come back tomorrow, please, and they just closed the game. And as of now, it's just officially you can't get in.
Yeah, I went in just thinking, oh, it's got to be updated. I was joking with Az, who's been on and done DRS before, that, yeah, we'll finally be able to do fantasy updates because we're recording a day late. Nope. The game has managed to screw us over yet again. And we'll have to cover it when we do Brazil next week, which, speaking of Brazil,
Yeah.
it's the end of the triple header, or the other word that Paul would use to refer to it as, the triple donger. And we're off to Interlagos. The Brazilian GP, been on the calendar since 1972. It's done a little bit of back and forth. It was Interlagos from 72 to 77. It popped into Rio for a year in 78, went back to Interlagos 79, 81 through 89, went and had a little party in Rio again. And then 1990 through to current day, it's Interlagos, which I just love this place. It's 71 laps of 2.677 miles of amazingness. It's in its third major version of this track, but actually, for me, I've only ever known it in this layout because it's basically been the same since 1990 with a few little minor modifications along the years.
I did some research on this a couple years ago because that's what I do. And the other versions prior to 90 had a lot more infield, so they were longer laps. And so kind of as you envision like the end of the lap as they weave around short of that wall before turn 12 and then sweeping on their way up. They just had the similar type infield on the way down. You'd come down after the first corner, and then it was just immediate sweepers left and right where it's relatively straight and then kind of goes around the outside now. So it's I like this iteration of it. I didn't know the other ones till I did the research, and I'm happy that we are at where we are at.
Yeah, I love the elevation changes here. I love that first corner where it just looks like it just drops away. It just must feel in an F1 car like the end of the earth, a flat earth, and you've just driven off the edge because it just down to the left. It's just amazing. There's so many spots for overtaking. It's not all DRS. You've got the drag race up the hill to the start finish straight. I just love this race. Now, it would be a massive, massive ironic twist if the race that we thought was going to give us a snooze fest in Mexico, which was really, really enjoyable, and then next week in Brazil is a dud. But
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. When we started doing this, and even before we started doing this, when we would just talk F1 at work in the mornings, the thing I'd say is I always loved like Spa. I had Monaco, and its novelty was always neat. And I had certain races I really liked, and others I respected. And Interlagos was like on the respected, but I didn't love it. I don't know why. And then as you started explaining how great it's been, even before, you and I, well before we started this, and things you'd seen happen there, and it's often near the end, and people have won championships, and I'm like, yeah. And then I paid a little more attention to Interlagos in 21 because we'd already started kind of having these conversations. I loved it, and I am very thrilled. I like that you've imparted this love of Interlagos onto me, and I hope to some of the listeners, because it's a great friggin' track, man. Now, if it does deliver a dud, my little soliloquy there, and then your promise ahead of that, it's to blame.
Yeah, probably. And we've got some great names on here as well, like a lot of the historical tracks. So repeat winners down the years for the Brazilian Grand Prix, not just Interlagos, is up at the top, Alain Prost with 6, Michael Schumacher with 4. We've got Reutemann, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis sitting on 3. And then we got on 2, we got Fittipaldi, Piquet, Mansell, Senna, Hakkinen, Montoya, Massa, Webber, Rosberg and Verstappen. So, you know what? Depending on which way the gnat farts next week, who's to say Lewis can't get a 4th win, but you probably say it's coming from a red or papaya car, but if Verstappen's got a new engine and can rocket ship his way through the track, who knows? But constructors-wise, it's McLaren with 12, Ferrari with 11, Williams, Mercedes, and Red Bull on 6, and Benetton, Renault, and Brabham with 2. I think we're a sprint weekend as well coming up, aren't we?
Yeah, we definitely are.
Last one of the season, or we got one more after? Is Qatar?
Because I have to use my 3X and my Limitless. So.
Oh, yeah. So last year was a sprint weekend as well. Quali gave us top 3 of Max. Okay, standard. Charles, yeah, standard. Lance Stroll. Alonso was 4th. Back in the days when Aston Martin were good and quick. How long ago does that feel now to be seeing a green car at the top end of the field? It's
a million
years
a year
ago. A year ago,
and when you talk about an Aston Martin, it reminded me as well that this was the epic battle. I know I'm getting ahead. Keep going. I'll hold my thoughts.
Yeah. I was going to keep your powder dry here because we'll be there in a second. We got the sprint shootout was Lando from Max from Checo. The sprint was boring. Nobody wanted to risk anything. It was just like a procession. The lights went out and everybody just followed each other around for 19 laps. We had Max took Lando early, and then that was that. It was Max, Lando, Checo up the front. I mean, what a memory lane blast here. We got Aston Martin's being good, and we got Checo on the sprint podium.
It's not a typo.
And then in the race, I'll let you talk about the epic thing that happened, but we had Max, Fernando as the podium. Charles crashed out on the formation lap due to a hydraulics issue. K-Mag collected Albon in turn 1 to take them both out. But the piece that you were referring to, Brian, I'll let you pick the baton up at this point.
Well, the last lap was just unbelievably epic as they battled for the last step of the podium. It was Fernando Alonso and Checo Perez, and it was so... Oh, man. I mean, they'd been kind of setting it up for a bit, and they passed, and I can't remember the sequence at this point. Again, the muscle relaxants are doing their job. And so I think it was Checo who got ahead of Fernando first, and it was early on the lap, and you thought, that's it. Move done. Checo's on the podium, and Fernando missed his chance on the last lap. He lost out, but Fernando said, no, thank you. I'm taking this back, and got Checo at the line and just teed it up perfectly coming out of the last corner. And the coolest part was it was all very strong. Like, they're both pretty good at defense. Fernando, I think, a league above Checo, but they were both clean the whole time. Like, they both ran each other inches wide of the track, but never forced each other off. And Fernando even said afterwards, Fernando being a tough grader, if you will, he said afterwards, I knew Checo would race clean. I know I could race him hard because I didn't have to worry about him doing something stupid. And I thought that was one of the greatest compliments anyone's ever given Checo, was after that. Even though he took his lunch, he still gave him a compliment.
Yeah, you're right. It'd been building, hadn't it, for the last few laps, and it'd been getting close, and then that last lap was just something special. So yeah, I'm hoping for an absolute superb Brazilian Grand Prix this weekend. If the race serves up the type of race last year did, I don't mind if the sprint is a procession again. Sprint has been a bit of a mixed bag here. I think it's worked, and it hasn't worked. So we'll see which way the gnat farts this time.
I think it was 2 weeks ago, or 2 years ago. We'll try the measure of time that works. 2 years ago, when the rain came through in quali, and Kevin Magnussen
right.
He got his first pole position, if I remember that right. And
you are right. Yeah,
it was the last year of the Ferrari debacle around strategy, or at least it was slowing down. But they sent Charles out on the wrong tires.
Wait, what are these tires?
Sorry, it's a mistake.
Actually, I think the sound is from Spa, but the sentiment is from Brazil. Regardless,
look how quick things change in F1. You've got Ferrari's clown show is now a thing of the past, and they actually seem to know how to nail strategy and win races. You've got, only a year ago, we were seeing the green machine up on the podium, and now we can't even believe it can score points, let alone get on the podium. And here we are looking at a race where Checo was absolutely going down to the final straight to try to get a podium finish, and nothing looks further from the truth right now. It's crazy sport that can just change in the blink of an eye. So I'm really looking forward to next weekend. I'm also hoping that your back sorts itself out and we can have a drug-free review. But you've held it together pretty well today, Brian. No one would know. If you hadn't mentioned it, there was no slurred words or kind of anything else. Although I have had to watch you stand up and sit down about a bazillion times as you're trying to get comfortable. So,
well, I hope it didn't mess up my audio. And Rob, thanks for giving us a day. Apologies to all listeners who had routines. Some of you sent notes. Hey, where was the pod this Monday morning? Sorry. It'll be back on regular time after this. But yeah, it was a really nice Mexican Grand Prix, and Rob and I are super excited for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Check out 1 week from now. Hang out with us as we kind of recap that. Everyone, thanks for joining us on The Dirty Side.